Hello, everyone. I'm Donna Lowry, joining you for PBS Books for an all-new episode in our virtual series about financial and investor protection. We've got a special event planned to help you make the most of your money. This event is for all ages, from those grinding away as a newbie in a career to those slowing down to prepare for retirement, making sure the money you earn today will cover your expenses later in life. It's all important in a conversation we're going to have today. So whether you want to know when to make adjustments to retirement accounts, how to cash in on credit card rewards, or are interested in exploring a passive income stream, we'll break it all down for you. First, we want to thank our partners who make this program possible today. The entire series is being generously funded by a grant from the Investor Protection Trust, IPT. It's a nonprofit organization devoted to investor education. And if you visit their website, you'll find a range of different investing and retirement planning tools, all for free. So more on that in just a bit. Let's get right to things. We've got a great lineup of financial experts who have different perspectives and share unique strategies on how to make your earnings work for you. We just celebrated Labor Day, so that was earlier this month, and it signals a return to work for some, for school, routine for everybody in this country. So while the end of summer can bring mixed feelings, we certainly don't have to view work as an enemy. Whether you love your job or just in it for the paycheck, there are great ways to make your earnings work for you. Both now, I should say, and in the future. So we are thrilled to welcome two panels of financial experts and coaches and teachers to today's events. They each bring a different perspective and opinion to the discussion. However, before you make any financial decisions, we recommend you seek professional advice to help assess your personal financial situation. So after the panel discussions today, we will have time to answer your viewer questions. So if you want us to cover a specific topic or have a question for one of our panelists, drop it in the comments section of the Facebook live stream or email the address you see on your screen. We'll cover as many questions as we can before we run out of time. So again, let's get started. First, we'll be discussing how to make your earnings grow while you are still working. While you're still at it, we want you to start making it grow. From your first job as a teenager or a recent graduate to your last before you retire, making smart money moves now will help you live out the life you want during your golden years. Here to discuss ways to make the most of your time as a working person are Laura Adams. She's a personal finance expert and award-winning author, and we're glad to have her with us. Hi.
Good to be with you.
Yes, and Chris Browning, founder and host of the Popcorn Finance Podcast. Glad you're here with us, Chris. So let's get started. So Chris, let's start with you. Planning for retirement often centers around getting to that magic number. Now, how can folks estimate a tangible number for them to reach?
Retirement is a goal that it often changes as we change, as we get older, as we figure out what it is we want out of life, what we want and envision retirement to be kind of shifts as our perspective shifts. And so how much money we need in retirement can be a difficult number to exactly pin down. But one technique that you can use is the 4% rule. And this has gained a lot of popularity. It's used all the time by financial planners, and it's just a good rule of thumb to help you kind of estimate what you're shooting for, what that target is out in the distance. And so there was a study done. It's called the Trinity study, done in the late 90s, and it looked at a wide range of years. And the whole goal of this was to see how much money could you safely take out of your retirement account and have it survive for at least 30 years. And what they found is that anywhere from 3 to 4%, you were typically safe. Like you could say, okay, I can pull that money out and I won't run out of money by the time I reach the later years of my life. And the way you can apply this rule to yourself is you can look at your income, or sorry, not look at your income, I just say you want to look at your expenses. And we look at like your real expenses, what you think they're going to be. Be realistic. Don't cut, a bunch of things off that you really will be spending money on in the future. And you can take that number that you would spend, say, in a given year, and you multiply that by 25. And that gives you a rough estimate of what that number is that you can be working towards in retirement. Like where you should, because you need something to be shooting towards. You need a goal to be working towards and to help you determine how much you need to be saving. And using this 4% rule is a quick rule of thumb that you can use to estimate what that number would be for you.
Okay, so expenses and multiply that by 25. Okay, so that's for people who are working on a regular job, regular employer. But for Laura, for gig workers or those who are self-employed, are there options for any kind of match retirement savings account similar to the ones traditionally offered in the workplace?
Unfortunately, there are not matching options when you're self-employed because you are responsible for funding that on your own. But just as Chris mentioned, using that target, the 25 times rule really does apply to gig workers as well. But the great thing is that when you're self-employed, you've got access to additional types of retirement accounts. So not only do you have a traditional IRA, a Roth IRA available to you, but you've also got accounts designed specifically for the self-employed. So a couple of those that you want to get familiar with are a SEP IRA and a solo 401k. So the solo 401k is going to be used for folks who don't have employees. These are people who are really working on their own. They don't plan to hire people. Maybe it's you, a business partner, maybe even a spouse working in your business. That's a great scenario for the solo 401k. And you can make contributions as both your own employer and the employee side. It allows some really high annual contribution rates. So for instance, depending on your income, you may qualify to contribute as much as $58,000 to a solo 401k for 2021. Now, if you do have employees, if you're looking at growing your business and bringing people on as employees, a SEP IRA might be a good way to go. That will also allow you to have some really high contribution rates, similar to the solo 401k. So I would recommend for folks to start small. If you're working a side gig, you've got self-employment income right now, maybe you want to open up a Roth IRA, as long as your income limit doesn't exceed the annual threshold, which is about $140,000 for single taxpayers and about $208,000 for joint filers, those that are married filing jointly. So as long as your income limits don't exceed that on an annual basis, you can use a Roth IRA.
Yeah, so I know that there are some people who are thinking, but what age should I do this? For each of you, at what age should you really get into this area of looking to retirement? Because, when you're starting in your 20s, you're thinking, I got a lot of time. Let's start with you, Chris.
Yeah, it's so easy to push things off and say, I'll worry about this once I get older, because retirement is such an abstract thing. It's so far out. We're not really good at picturing what life will be like, decades down the road. So I really think as soon as possible, like whatever age you're at right now, go ahead and start looking at these numbers, because really the best tool you have is time. So starting now, whatever age, if you're 18, if you're 16, and you have a part-time job, start looking at these options now, because you'll be in such a better place if you start as early as you can.
Yeah. So you have time, right? A little bit, Laura?
I totally agree.
The younger you are.
Yeah, the more time you have to let those investments grow, the better off you're going to be. And ultimately, the less you have to contribute to an investment account, a retirement account, to reach your goals, the sooner you start. And the great thing about a Roth IRA is that it is available to minors who are earning self-employment income. So like Chris said, if you've got that part-time job, summer job, you can begin making contributions right away. So, the bottom line is the sooner you begin contributing to your retirement, the better off you'll be. I know it doesn't always seem like, the best way to spend money, especially if you're young and retirement does seem so far away. But the reality is, if you consistently contribute over, 30 or 40 years, you can easily retire a millionaire simply by making regular contributions and getting, a pretty moderate rate of return on those investments.
Yeah, I know we're going to talk about that more as we continue. But Chris, I want to get into some passive incomes, some streams for younger workers to help them explore how to get ahead on retirement savings. What do you suggest?
Yeah, I was the side hustle guy when I was in college and high school, just trying to bring in a little money when I was making very little. And when it comes to passive income, I think sometimes the term gets used a lot, but it can be hard to find those actual passive items, because for it to be passive means that you're going to spend some time up front, some money to set it up, and it's going to generate income without you having to do anything else. And there's very few truly passive areas, and if there are, they do require some considerable work up front. So it'll be things like building a website or creating a course or writing a book. These are things that you can do, that you can set up, and they kind of run on their own. But you do need to have a level of expertise. You need to have a level of time to build these things up, to bring in the traffic and attention you need to generate an income source. One thing I have seen that people do that is fairly I guess easy to get into, but it does take some time for you to market yourself, is to create like digital resources. I see people who create charts and tables, or if they're really good at Excel, they'll make Excel templates and things like this, and they'll put them up on stores like Etsy, for example. And it's something you can just set up a quick store and let that run in the background. There are some things that are a little slightly less passive that may require a little bit more on your side. Investing, for example. This does obviously require income coming from another source, but putting your money into the stock market, or investing in bonds, things like that, they can generate income for you. I've seen people who rent out their car. There's so many apps now that allow you to rent out your car, especially if you are in a position where you don't really use it as much. Maybe you're working from home. Maybe you're not traveling as much because of the pandemic. You can rent your car out, and people can just basically, you just kind of make sure it's clean and get it set up, and then they take your car and use it for their vacation, things like that. But for me, I'm a big fan of investing in yourself. One of the biggest things that helped me to bring in some extra money when I was trying to pay off debt was really investing in my career and putting in more time into that. So I would go to special trainings. I would go to conferences. I would read extra material and study up and put money and time into myself, so that way I could become more marketable. And that was one of the biggest things I did to increase my income, along with some of these other side hustles that kind of I tacked on together to help me get a little bit more money that I could pay off debt and invest more.
Yeah, I love the side hustles. I just heard about that one where you rent out your car. I read it in the book, and I was like, really? That's a thing. So yeah, there's a lot out there. People are really creative in what they come up with. So
Yeah.
Laura, what are some ways to streamline finances, both when it comes to savings and when it comes to spending?
Yeah, this is a common question that I get from the Money Girl listeners, my weekly podcast. I get a lot of questions about, how do I approach my money management in general? And so what I always recommend is taking a look at what is your cash flow, what's coming in, what's going out. And in a lot of cases where we have the biggest opportunities is the biggest expenses that we have. So looking at things like housing, your vehicles, what are the big expenses? I know it's not always easy to cut those back, but if you can, that's often where you can get the biggest reward and the biggest savings. So maybe that's downsizing your home or apartment, or, going from 2 vehicles to 1, or downsizing from, a more expensive vehicle to a less expensive vehicle. So really looking at what are you, what are those big expenses? And then on the income side, I love what Chris is saying about really thinking about ways to earn extra income. In a lot of cases, that is the secret to being able to pay off debt, to reach your financial goals, having a little bit of income security by diversifying your income sources. So, even if you've got a day job, think about what skills you've got that you could use in a side hustle. It could be part-time, or, maybe it's even something that you want to go full-time with it. So really thinking about, how do I increase the income that I have? How do I decrease those expenses? And that really just starts with creating a budget and a spending plan, so that you're fully aware of what's coming in and what's going out each month. You cannot manage what you don't measure.
I like that. You can't manage what you don't measure. Okay, so Chris, what are some basic steps to developing an investment plan in particular? And how does that differ from retirement planning or just simply financial planning, that budget that Laura was talking about?
Yeah, so all 3 of these items, they interplay with each other. So like an investment plan is part of your retirement plan. Your retirement plan is part of your overall financial plan. And so just to kind of quickly just drill down through those, like a financial plan, that's where you kind of set your goals. Like, what do you want to accomplish in the next 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? What is your debt repayment strategy? Are you taking care of your insurance needs? Do you have life insurance, disability insurance? Do you have the correct health insurance? And even like your saving strategy. These are all things that you put into your overall financial plan, even including estate planning. When you drill down to your retirement plan specifically, this is where you look at things like, what age do I want to retire at? What expenses do I think I'll actually have in retirement? How much income am I going to need to come in on a monthly basis? And then how do I prepare and save for these needs? And so then that brings us down to the investment plan, or like your investment strategy. And so here we're looking at, what is it that we're investing in? Like, what items are we interested in? Are we going to become an index fund investor, where we go in and we purchase index funds in our retirement plan? Or are we going to look at bonds? Are we going to be looking at other alternative investments? This is where you decide where you want your money to go. You also, where are you going to be investing? So for most people, a large chunk of the population, they'll have access to retirement plans through work, something like a 401k plan, which is a great place to start. It's so easy because you can actually just do the contributions directly out of your paycheck, and you can not even worry about it. It makes it extremely simple, something that's automated and happens on a regular basis. If you're someone who doesn't have a work offered retirement plan, you can open up an IRA, and there you can just invest on your own and still receive those great tax benefits. Another item you look at in your investment plan would be something like, how often am I going to be contributing? Is it going to be on a monthly basis? Am I going to do it bi-weekly with my paycheck? Just coming up with a strategy, because what you want to do is make it as simple as possible, and just take yourself out of it. Because one of the biggest detriments to our retirement plan, our investing plan, is ourselves. And we oftentimes will get in our own way and be our worst enemy and forget to contribute, or say, you know what, I'll take this month off, or I have this trip, maybe I'll do that. And we can easily derail our whole plan. So deciding upfront, how am I going to be doing this, and automating that process. And then also you want to look at, how often will I go in and review this plan? Like, how am I doing? Am I hitting the targets that I set for myself? Am I actually putting the money in an actual investment? Oftentimes we put money into a retirement plan and don't select an actual investment for it to go into, because something like a 401k is just the account. It's just the place where that money is going to be held, either money or investments. And you have to make sure that when the money goes in, you select the investments you'd like to purchase with the cash you're putting into these plans. So all these items will be part of your overall investment plan. Each thing is important, and something that you just want to be mindful of, because you don't want to just go in without a plan and without a strategy, and because that's oftentimes where we get lost and get discouraged in the process.
Just have that plan and try to stick with it. Evaluate it every once in a while, but try to stick with it. So, Laura, let's talk about credit cards. Credit cards are a way of life these days, and there are some great benefits to using them over cash. We know that. So how can we make the most of credit cards?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of using rewards credit cards when possible, using your everyday expenses to earn rewards, whether that's cash back or points for travel. What I would recommend listeners and viewers do is to compare cards carefully. Take a look at what's in your wallet. What cards are you using right now, and are you getting rewards? You can use a really great site like finder.com to compare. Look at what are the different rewards cards out there and find out what's the best for me. So for instance, if you are somebody who spends a lot on a credit card for gas or groceries, make sure you're using a card that is paying you rewards for those types of purchases. That's the way to really max it out. Now, of course, you want to be paying off those balances every month on time so that you can avoid interest charges. But if you tend to carry a balance from month to month, that's when you want to look for a low rate card. So again, you can use a site like finder.com to compare all these different categories of cards to really make sure that you are savvy when it comes to using a card. If you're rolling over balances month to month and you're paying high interest rates, it's not working for you. It's working against you. So we want to make sure that these really powerful financial tools are working in our favor, and we're not just racking up interest and paying unnecessary fees and charges. So they're very powerful. They can work to your benefit or work to your detriment on how you manage them and how you use them. So the key is responsible credit card use. And I would encourage parents to also talk to their kids. It's a big decision to allow a young person to use a credit card. So really understanding, should they be an authorized user on the account with you, or should they have their own credit card? These are really important topics that families need to determine. And I think setting a good example and laying a good foundation for young people so that they understand how to use a credit card wisely, and that it's just not an unlimited source of cash, is really important. Parents need to make sure that they're setting a good example and really living that example themselves.
I know that when you're getting back to talking about rewards, that you can get so focused on the kind of rewards you get that you're spending so much on credit card debt, and you're not realizing how much it's adding up. because you're getting nice rewards out of it. So yeah, doing it responsibly, I think, is the best way. You mentioned it. So we've talked about credit cards. Let's talk about loans, Chris. Paying towards loans isn't always as satisfying as watching savings or investment accounts grow. So how can folks start lowering debt as a way of making their money work for them?
Donna, I love this question, and because oftentimes a good debt repayment strategy, it can be just as important, maybe even more important in some situations, in how you're investing or saving your money. Because sometimes these loans or credit cards have extremely high interest rates. And so just like to make it a little bit clear, like so say, for example, you have $100 available to you and you want to either save it or you want to pay down a credit card. So say you decide to put that into your retirement plan. On average, the stock market returns about 10%. If you adjust that for inflation, it's really like 7%. So let's just use that to be a little more conservative here. And if you put that in after a year, you'd have roughly, $107. Now, say that same credit card had a $100 balance on it and it was just sitting there, and you, instead of paying that off, you just put it into your retirement account. And that credit card had a 25% interest rate, which is not uncommon for rates to be that high. At the end of the year, you'd have over $125 now on that card, assuming you didn't use it anymore. And so in that situation, you're looking at, you've actually lost $18 because you may have made $7 over here in return, but you've cost yourself another $25 in interest. And that's really the importance of looking at your debt and paying down your debt as a way of helping yourself financially and saving yourself money, because this is just an example using $100. But if you moved it to $1,000, that'd be $180. If you move it to $100,000, you're looking at $1,800. So the more money that's sitting in there in these high interest, say loans or credit cards, the more it's costing you over time. And so it doesn't really mean that you shouldn't invest and all your money should go to debt. I think there's important to have balance, but I think it's more so that we need to pay attention to the debt that we do have and see how impactful it is to pay that down. Because I think there's a lot of shame around debt. We feel bad as we get ourselves in these situations, especially if it's not like, a mortgage, maybe not so much. We feel good about a mortgage, but if it's a credit card or maybe an auto loan for a car we know we paid too much for, we feel the shame around debt. So oftentimes we want to ignore it and look at the good things like investing and saving. That makes you feel good. But don't neglect the fact that you are being charged interest on these loans, and specifically if they are high interest credit cards and things like that, you can be doing even more benefit for your overall financial health by paying those balances down, getting that under control, and then putting a little bit towards investing as well. You can do both at the same time.
Yeah, well, you guys have great information. I think if anybody is watching there, they really had some good stuff to take notes about in terms of all of this and really get us thinking and maybe looking at what we have. So I know we were going to move on for a second, but you two will stick around. I know people have questions for you. So if you have questions, get them ready, because we're going to move on and talk to our next group. And we're going to talk about how to make the paychecks we earn during our working years last through retirement. And so with us now to discuss stretching these earnings into our dream retirement are Pam Kruger, who created the Money Track series on public television stations. And she is co-host of the Friends Talk Money podcast. And we love having her on these events. Hi there.
Hi, Donna. Great to be here. Thank you.
Absolutely. And Elle Martinez, creator of Couple Money. I'm excited to hear that you're with us. You help spouses get on the same page when it comes to finances. So important. Thank you for being here too.
I'm thrilled to be here. Yeah, that's its own challenge on top of the finances.
Yes. So we're going to get to that in a moment, but I'm going to start with you, Pam. Let's talk about approaching retirement. So when you're just about to retire, should you make changes to your retirement accounts or consolidate them? What's your best advice with that?
Best advice is that when you're at that point where you're just at the starting line and you're about to just, walk over the starting line into retirement now, this is the time to slow everything down. And yes, you have some key decisions that you have to make at this point, but no, you don't want to do them in a hurry. And I'm so happy that Elle is here as well, because we're going to be bouncing off of each other with this point that I'm going to make, which is that so many people forget that, when you're working away, if you're married, your partner or your spouse is also over here in their world, earning their money in their 401k, and it's growing. Maybe one person in the household has been the decision maker on the investments. But now let's fast forward. You're at that point where you're walking together over the starting line of retirement. Even if it's only you who's retiring and your spouse is going to continue to work, this is the time that before you make those adjustments and decisions that I'll mention, and I will, kind of describe, this is the point where being on the same page. And if that other spouse has not been involved in the decisions, maybe hasn't had an interest, let's face it, in finances or the money decisions, because you've been the one on behalf of the household that makes the investment decisions, this is the time to come together and actually decide that even if you weren't interested in it, you need to get interested and participate in it, because this is going to affect both of us now. So this is where your two roads come together, even if it's only one of you that's actually retiring, quote unquote. And the very, very first thing to do before you even decide if you want to stay in plan with your 401k, do you want to roll it over into an IRA? Do you want to consolidate all of your different accounts? Because we always accumulate over time. We've been on this journey through life. So we have suitcases of money, that are in these different places that we've had in different IRA accounts or different 401k accounts. And now it's time to bring it all together and really look at things holistically and the complete picture. So before making any adjustments and decisions about things, evaluate. Now's the time to slow down. And this is where I say the real retirement planning actually starts at retirement, because up until then, it's all been a rehearsal. Now it's real. Okay. So this is where, sitting down and evaluating and looking at everything realistically. Maybe you do that yourself and you feel really good that you have the ability to be unbiased, take a look, look with your eyes wide open at what you have, what kind of debt you have, if any, where you stand financially, the whole picture. Maybe you do that alone. Maybe you reach for help. Maybe at that point in life, that's the point where you do want to involve, the possibility of bringing in a financial planner or an advisor. I think that this is one of those times where it does make sense. The only caution there that I hope everybody walks away with is that advisor, no matter who you choose, needs to work only and directly for you. They cannot be employed as a salesperson, because you won't necessarily know if the advice you're getting is truly unbiased or whether it's motivated to make a sale of an investment or a product or an insurance annuity, whatever it might be. You need to get the advice from someone who absolutely is paid only by you. It's called on a fee-only basis. And those advisors are held to the fiduciary standard. Now, whether you do it alone, you do it with your spouse together, and you just do it yourself, or you do it with help, evaluating, assessing, and reviewing, and really understanding where you stand. Now, going forward, you can start to think about some of the key decisions that you need to make. A couple of those adjustments might be things like, Chris did such a great job, as did Laura, discussing debt. And the same thing goes in retirement, which we'll touch on and know in a bit. But it's really now looking at, how am I going to turn this savings that I've had in combination with my Social Security into a paycheck for life? This has to become my paycheck, because I'm ready to turn off the income, which is a very serious decision right there. So there are things that you're going to want to look at in your portfolio that may be adjusted, rebalanced. You want to bring your risk and your portfolio back into alignment. You want to bring that significant other into the conversation at this point. And then you want to sit down and look at how much do we want to handle all of these tasks and all of this maintenance of our investment portfolio, and are looking at the cash flow and stress testing. How much do we think we're going to spend? Like Chris mentioned earlier, how much do we really think we're going to spend every year now? And sitting down and evaluating and reviewing all those decisions and pulling it all together. And that's the starting point. And then the adjustments can be made from there. But at first, you have to just slow down, stop, and evaluate and review so that you can go into this with confidence. Because at the end of the day, the only thing that matters about retirement and finances is peace of mind.
Yeah. So I know that I know Elle, you have lots to talk about in terms of this too, is she's really set us up really great. And the one thing that stuck out with me is it's not likely that you and your spouse will retire at the same time. So there's that consideration too, in terms of, whose money you're looking at the time of your retirement, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And something that I really loved was the peace of mind. This is really what we're talking about, is making sure that peace of mind, that our nest egg is not gonna, run out, and that we're prepared. But as you've seen this past 18 months, we can't always prepare for every single thing. And the best we can do is come up with a foundation that gives us enough flexibility, and that we are have a plan in place that should things need to be adjusted, that we can do that. And something that I've advocated on my site and my podcast are monthly money dates, where you check in as a couple with your budget, but then also a couple times a year, your dates are about the big picture. What are we hoping to accomplish end of this year, next few years, as retirement approaches? Because, as we talk about, we don't want this to be like a brand new big conversation. We just want this to be the next step. This is the next pivot that we have to make together. So that way you feel more comfortable making a decision that you're both happy with, because you have a general idea. I've been married almost 15 years. You can always get surprised, but you have a general idea of, where you want to go with each other, and what you want to see with your retirement and other financial plans.
Should someone expect to withdraw? So how much money should someone expect to withdraw from the retirement savings each year, though?
Yeah. So, we want to keep that nest egg healthy, last through our retirement. So Chris mentioned this, and he did a really good job summarizing that guideline of 3 to 4% of your nest egg. But as with everything as a guideline, there's so many things that you want to consider. Again, that uncertainty that we face this past year and a half. But that's not the only thing we have going. We have the market volatility, we have inflation, and then unfortunately things can happen. You can have a major expense. It could be a healthcare expense that comes up. And so how do you incorporate that with your retirement plan? So I do like having that 3 to 4% rule to give you some kind of goal to work towards, but then also see your retirement savings not just as one lump sum, but maybe think of it as layers, where you approach it, where you have in safer, less volatile investments, enough to cover for the next few years of retirement, maybe, 3 to 5 years. And then you have a layer from 5 to 10 years or 5 to 15 years. And then you still have some money of your nest egg that is a little more aggressive, but that's something you don't have to touch for over a decade. And so instead of seeing your nest egg as this one lump sum, approach it from a more layered approach. That way, when something happens like last year, if you happen to be withdrawing around that time, you're not panicking, because you have that runway with these layers built in with your retirement.
Yeah. So that sounds wonderful. And Pam, Elle talked about having these dates, as spouses, but I think we all need to go with looking at changes on a regular basis, right? So what are some annual adjustments that we may need to make when it comes to retirement planning?
Right. Remember how Chris said it best when he said or maybe it was Laura, I can't remember, that came up, you can't manage, what you don't measure. And then there's all that old axiom that we always hear when we're going to do something to our house, which is, always measure twice and then cut once. Let me tell you, when it comes to retirement and planning your money, that could not be more applicable and more true. So I really think that the best way to think of your life going forward financially in retirement, I love what Elle just said about the layers, because it's so true. And Dawn, I think what you're really pointing to here is that life is not a snapshot, right? So you're not a static snapshot. Here's the date today. Here's my snapshot of where I stand. And then you do that every once in a while. No, it has to be fluid. It has to be dynamic, because your life is going to change. Prevailing interest rates, which is like prevailing winds, are going to shift. You have no control over that. The stock market at some point will shift. You have no control over that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some adjustments, and I'm going to use my own life as an example. I have some friends who right now are at the point where they're maybe a few years older than I am. They're getting ready to retire. We just had this big conversation sitting around the table at lunch, and they said, what should I be doing right now? You know, the market's been so strong and it's so exciting, and I see my portfolio growing. And I say, oh my God, the best time to buy an umbrella is before it starts raining. Really, this is the time right now when anybody who's on the precipice of retiring or already in retirement, and you've just been letting your portfolio balloon and grow because the stock market has ballooned and grown, and you're so happy to see that. But what's going to happen when things change, right? Things are going to shift at some point. And then so many people get caught in a situation where they panic when they see the market go down or sideways for any prolonged period of time. And what happens? They need to raise cash because there was a pandemic. And then they had to sell after the market went down. That is your biggest way of losing money. And in retirement, you don't have any do-overs. You're not working any longer. Maybe your spouse is still working, but you've given up your income unless you're going to choose to keep working. So in that sense, that's why it's really important to, while the sun is shining, buy an umbrella, which means look at your portfolio and you decide and say to yourself, do I have a lot of profits in large company US stocks? Do I understand? Am I really seeing that right? Should I take some of those profits off the table perhaps and move some of those over into cash? That gets back to what Elle just said about building those layers. Again, you may not feel comfortable making these decisions yourself. You may want to engage with a planner, but I want you to think about a financial plan as a movie, not a snapshot. Everything's going to change. And some of those changes you can control, and some of those changes you cannot control. It might be medical, health. You don't know what's going to be happening. So that's why it's good to nail down, measure once, cut twice, really understand where you are, and stress test the heck out of it. So if you do decide that you want to take the 4% from your portfolio every year out of your savings to live, sit down and stress test it. So you say, well, what if this happens? What if we sold our family home? What if we had a rental property over here? You've got to play with all these things that are levers that move the numbers and see the dynamics of how it changes your situation, because one little tweak over here could have a real positive impact over here, or vice versa. And when you're in retirement, you can't afford to be thinking, well, I'll make it up later. You're not going to make it up later. So you want to get it right now. So those are the things to consider that need to be adjusted once you have already decided that you're going to stop your paycheck.
Okay, snapshot, and have an umbrella before you need the umbrella. But I need to talk about, I think we have to talk about, Elle, people who've put off investing altogether, planning for retirement, they haven't done it. They try it later in their careers. And so what are some ways that middle-aged or older people can make up for that lost time?
Well, first of all, the good news is there is still time. The best time to start is today years old, where you're at. And I love Pam's illustration about, levers. We're going to be focusing on things that you can control. And I want to start with some of the low-hanging fruit, things that you already have. So if you're working at a 9 to 5 and you have a 401k where your employer matches, make sure you're maximizing that. That's free money that you get that is tax advantage, and make sure that you're contributing as much as you can. Now, currently the contribution limits for a 401k are like $19,500, but if you're 50 or older, that's $26,000 you can sock away towards that. Then the next question, of course, is, well, currently I don't have that much money. I can't maximize my 401k. So then we're going to look at optimizing your expenses and making sure that it is in a good financial position. And this, as you'll see, like, we're all connecting with each other because these conversations are all related to each other, that cash flow. So if you can't maybe save as much as you hope for retirement, the other side of it is make sure you don't need as much And so you're looking at your annual expenses. And this is why it's so important, if you can't, pay off your high interest debt before you retire. If you're able to do that, that means your nest egg is a little bit stronger and you don't have to stress out as much because you have that foundation in place. So if you can create a debt-free plan, I think all of us can tell you that we have maybe a favorite that we go with, but something that's sustainable and that you guys can keep is the one you should go with. And then finally, the other side of the equation, we're looking at cutting back, and optimizing your expenses. But the reality is, for a lot of families, is that you're going to have to earn more. And here is where those side hustles, side gigs, freelancing come into play, because you can use that income exclusively, if you want to go towards your contributions, towards your IRA, and build up your nest egg while you can during these income generating years. So I know we're referencing each other, but that's how important it is with a financial plan, is that you look at each of the pieces and then you can figure out, based on your situation, your time frame, your goals, what pieces you need to put in first.
Yeah, I love the synergy you guys have all had on this program. So Pam, the percentage of people who work in retirement has been on the rise. We've seen it, especially during this pandemic. The Bureau of Labor Statistics says by 2026, up to 30% of people over the age of 65 will be employed in some capacity. So they're not retiring. What are some questions to ask or things to think about if you want to actually work in those, what we've considered the retirement years?
Yeah, I think that it's fantastic. I think it's a great trend. It's a strong trend. And for many reasons, not only the obvious financial benefits of continuing to work and postponing retirement, but, we live longer. People are aware that, we live longer now. Our lifespans are likely to be, living to 90, so it's not a surprise. So we have to figure out, well, do we really want to stop working at 65? And, what does that look like? What is life going to look like if I really stop and turn off my paycheck at 65? And then I've got another, possibly, 30 years more to fund, which is a lot. So there's a lot of questions involved in that. But what's really cool, I think, that the trend is also that people are working, maybe less. They might not continue in their current role with their company. So maybe they do walk away from the 401k, and they feel like they've taken it as far as it needs to go. And then they're ready to do something they want to do that's a real passion that they can turn into an income part-time. And, postponing retirement and postponing taking Social Security and pushing that out to your full retirement age, that that's going to boost your Social Security check, after a certain point, to where it breaks even. And, you are gambling a little bit there, saying, I am going to live beyond 85 years old to really get the benefit of that higher paycheck, but Social Security check. But some people, if you need a Social Security check right away, by all means, then you have to tap into it to pay your bills. But if you don't need it and you can do something 3 or 4 days a week, I've seen people that I know in my own life turn their hobbies into very lucrative businesses, and they really didn't even expect to. And so they not only postpone tapping into Social Security, they actually are not spending as much, if you think about it then, the money that they would have spent in their retirement every year. So someone who can delay retirement by 1 year and not touching your nest egg by 1 year, just think about how much that, if you're used to spending $40,000 a year and you didn't spend it, that goes to, your nest egg and gets invested for you as well. So I just think that there's a lot of opportunities out there that were never available before that people can do online. I'll just give you one quick example that wasn't internet related. A friend of mine who was I did this on my podcast, I interviewed her. She didn't really start her own business until she was 70. And she started an interior design business without any credentials. It was just her experience having worked as manager of a furniture store. And she had so many people who loved her that people came to her and said, I want you to decorate for me. And her business blew up to the point where now she says, Pam, I'm making more money than I've ever made in my entire life. And I get to pick and choose my clients. I get to pick and choose how much I want to work. And I'm not touching that nest egg that I've been helping her invest and helping her set aside. So there's a lot of joy that can come from delaying retirement, gig work in your 60s and beyond. It's just not the way it was anymore. And with obviously all the opportunities online, there are just so many different ways to continue to earn money. But I don't even know that I really answered the question.
You did.
But I think that it's a whole world to think about how not to spend your savings when you're retired by doing something you really love doing and bringing in a little income.
Yeah, I think we're all thinking about all of that. So thank you so much for that. Thanks to both of you. I know you're going to be around for questions in a few minutes. So we're going to go from managing debt to exploring self-employed options for gig employees and routinely checking your assets even after entering retirement to make sure you're still on track. And I learned so much in this discussion, but in a few minutes, we're just going to invite all of our panelists back to answer questions for you. So if you want something answered, drop your question into the comments section of the Facebook live stream post, or email the address on your screen. We already have some questions coming in, so I'm excited about that. But first, I want to tell you about a great resource to help you learn more about investing right in your own state. State regulatory offices are playing a key role in this education series. And as I mentioned a little earlier, the IPT has funded this series since 1993. It has worked with the states to provide the independent, objective investor education so all Americans can be informed and make wise investment decisions at any stage in their lives. So every state has a securities regulatory office in some capacity, and they all work hard to protect citizens from fraud by providing unbiased financial and investor education resources for free. So to learn more about the agency where you live, visit nsaa.org/contact your regulator. And you can get that more information from on your screen and through these events. Additionally, libraries are a cornerstone in communities and do a fabulous job educating and entertaining cities and towns all across the country. PBS Books is the vehicle bringing you this event today. So here's a word from the PBS Books National Director, Heather Maria Montilla. Heather?
Hello, everyone. I'm Heather Marie Montilla, the PBS Books National Director. I'm thrilled to be here. Today's event is being shared by PBS Books Library Network, consisting of more than 1,800 libraries and numerous PBS stations across all 50 states. Here at PBS Books, we strive to help your local library and PBS stations connect its community to valuable resources like this financial education series. For decades, local libraries have brought quality, educational, informative, and socially aware content to their communities. From books and research to reading clubs, seminars, and adult education classes, libraries have always found a way to adapt and provide resources and ways for you to learn and grow alongside other people in your area. We're happy many of our Library Network partners are joining us today in live streaming this event on their own social media channels, extending the message of today's important event, fostering the love of learning for all ages. Wherever you are watching from today, we encourage you to share the event on your own social media network. To learn more about the work we do and the work we amplify, check us out at pbsbooks.org. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. A great reminder to utilize your local libraries and all their resources to help you plan for a secure financial future. So now I'd like to invite back all of our panelists and open the floor for viewer questions. And if you have a question, again, drop it in the chat section of the PBS Books Facebook Live post, or send an email to the address we've been showing on the screen. We'll get through as many questions as we can in the next few minutes. So there's one for you, Laura. The person asks, there are always some good tips around tax season on how to use a tax refund wisely, but adjusting withholding allowances to reduce a refund can actually work in a lot of people's favor. Talk about that a little bit.
Right. So a lot of people kind of look forward to getting that tax refund every year. And the reality is, if you're getting a refund, that means you are overpaying your taxes on a paycheck by paycheck basis throughout the year. The ideal situation is to make it so that you have a $0 refund. That would mean that you're paying in the perfect amount. That rarely happens. But what I would recommend is that if you are getting a large tax refund every year, if you can adjust your withholding allowances so that you're having less withheld, you're going to end up getting a smaller refund, but you're going to get higher paychecks throughout the year. That may be a really wise opportunity for you to have extra income in your budget that you can use for all the things we've been talking about, saving and investing. And so you do want to adjust that with your employer. It's pretty easy to do, just filling out a new withholding form. That could happen if, let's say, you've got a second job, maybe you're earning more income, or you've got substantial tax deductions like maxing out a traditional 401k. All of those things will reduce your tax liability and make it so that you don't have to pay as much tax throughout the year. So that's a key takeaway. If you're getting a big tax refund, while it might seem like, kind of a windfall, it's not a windfall. It's just you getting back the taxes that you prepaid throughout the prior year.
All right. Thank you very much. Question for you, Elle. What are some common mistakes that retirees make?
Well, there's a few that I see that come up again. One is adjusting your investments for the time frame or this new season of life that you're in. We've mentioned again that idea of layers. Of course, you want to be more conservative when you're in retirement. As Pam mentioned, there is no do-over. You're in the middle of the season, so you want that money to last in your nest egg to stand up during your whole retirement. So make sure that your asset allocation, how you're investing, makes sense for your retirement, as you're entering it. How are you approaching it to make sure that you have enough for it? The other is, and we talked about this before, is Social Security, taking it too soon. And this is why it's so important, if you can start today, is run the numbers, do those stress tests and scenarios. You can actually go on the Social Security website, for example, and kind of get an idea of about how much benefit will I get if I decide to take Social Security at 62, for example, 67 or 70. And I had briefly just looked this week to get an idea, and it's a significant difference. You're talking about, if I started soon, $1,900 would be the monthly benefit, or if I waited to 70 because my nest egg is strong enough to handle that, then that's $3,500, I believe, was that benefit. So that is significant difference. So you want to make sure that you time it right. Again, we can't anticipate everything, but if we make this kind of a routine where we check in, run the numbers, and see what scenario makes sense for us, then when you're retired, you'll be better prepared.
Yeah, good advice. Good advice. You guys are great. I love it. Question for you, Chris. A workplace tool that people can use to work for them now and in retirement is health savings accounts. So can you talk a little about the benefits?
Yeah, this is one of those things that doesn't get talked about much. I mean, also, I think there's not a lot of educational information in our workplaces sometimes when it comes to all the benefits we receive. And an HSA is one of the great tools that are out there, especially if you have you have to have a high deductible insurance plan. So that means that you have typically there's a point at which your insurance will kick in. That'll be your deductible. So you have to pay a certain amount on your own up until you hit that threshold. With a high deductible plan, that threshold is extremely high, normally in the thousands of dollars. And so typically, to pair with this, to make the impact of that a little bit less on the employee, you have access to an HSA. And with an HSA, it allows you to put contributions in and receive the tax benefit, kind of similar to what you would receive if you were to put your money into a retirement plan. But in addition to that, in some states as well, you can also receive tax exemption from, for example, like your Social Security and Medicare taxes. So that's another benefit on top of that. And then you can pull those contributions out in order to cover your health insurance costs. So it gives you a slight benefit. So you basically get the tax savings. You don't have to pay any tax on the money going into this plan. And then you can pull that out to cover your health insurance costs, not only right now in the present as you go to the doctor and receive care, but also in your later years in retirement. And then also another benefit on top of that is the money that goes into this plan can also be invested. So not only do you get tax savings when the money goes in, it can also sit there and grow over time. And so if you're someone who doesn't go to the doctor very often, so you're like, my out-of-pocket costs are probably going to be very minimal when I go in to get care throughout the year. You can really stack money into this plan and let it grow year after year, and then have this nice nest egg waiting for you, in addition to your 401k or IRA. And this money can be used to cover your healthcare costs, which for most people is higher in the later stages of life. So it's one of those great tools that is not used often and sometimes is misunderstood, but it has some really great tax benefits for you.
Yeah, I love hearing my daughter talk about her HSA, and she's young now. So, the fact that she's talking about it now, really doesn't have to use it. You've given great information on what can happen. So Pam, a question for you. We've been talking about making money work for us, but retirement, we don't always have a traditional paycheck. Is it realistic to still think investment earnings can work for us in some way?
They will go to work for you in some way. The question as to whether it will be 80% of the income that you spend in retirement, or whether you're going to turn your whole investment portfolio that you've saved over the years, turn that into a paycheck that's going to cover 30% and the rest is going to be Social Security, or maybe you have a pension, or maybe you do work part-time. The reason that it's so important to look at that question before you stop working, if you can, if it's at all possible, to look at everything and do that stress testing that I mentioned before you retire, because that's the time when you're calm, you're not in a panic, you know that you have some options ahead of you, possibly, you know what you're in for. That's where you have to do these what if scenarios, where you do the math and you say, what if I stopped working next year and just cut off completely? What if my spouse quits working in 3 years? Everything's cut off. What if we ended up having to help our children? What if we end up selling our house? These are all the what if scenarios that have to be stress tested and factored in to give you the confidence that the savings that you have, that lump sum, that big portfolio, all holistically together, will generate enough of a paycheck to cover whether it's 20%, 40%, 90% of your living expenses. That's why it's so important to know beforehand, because you really need to stress test it before you stop working, if you can do it, because it will be a big help.
There's so much. I'm sorry. Thank you so much for that. There is so much information in this one show. As Heather mentioned, I think we all should try to repost it, and then anybody who's watching to do that too, so we can share this information with other people. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have right now. I want to thank all of our wonderful panelists. You were great, good information. And thank you to those who submitted a question. For more resource guides about planning for retirement, visit investorprotection.org. And as always, utilize your local library for books, magazines, seminars, and pamphlets about resources available where you live. And to watch a recording of this live stream, visit pbsbooks.org. Thank you for joining us. Check out those resources for more information, and join us again next month when we discuss financial fraud and other disguises for you to watch out for. Bye-bye.